नमस्कार, सत श्री अकाल, राम राम सा, खंबा वेणी वणक्कम प्रणाम। आप सभी का ऑल्टरनेट मीडिया में फिर से स्वागत है। थोड़े से इंटरवल के बाद हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं पीवीआर नरसिम्हा राव सर। पीवीआर नरसिम्हा राव नोन फॉर हिज एस्ट्रोलॉजी एंड लॉट ऑफ अदर वर्क्स। हम लोग रेगुलरली प्रेडिक्शंस करते रहते हैं जब भी इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट्स होते हैं। रिसेंटली हमने बहुत सारे चेंजेस देखे हैं। ट्रम्प का अपॉइंटमेंट देखा है, ट्रम्प के बाद भी हमने दिल्ली इलेक्शंस को प्रेडिक्ट किया था एंड विच वी वर स्पॉट ऑन फॉर दिल्ली इलेक्शंस। पर अभी जो हम लोग करने वाले हैं, जो आज का सेशन होगा, दैट इज बेसिकली अराउंड जियोपॉलिटिक्स, द चेंजिंग जियोपॉलिटिक्स एंड द चेंजिंग वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर। उसके बाद रशिया और यूएसए के बीच में एक पर्दे के पीछे बिहाइंड द कर्टन्स एक कुछ चल रहा है। आई मीन क्या चल रहा है, खट्टा मीठा, उसके बारे में विल डिस्कस। एंड विल द क्रिश्चियंस रिवोल्ट एंड सक्सीड अगेंस्ट इस्लाम इन वेस्ट, बिकॉज वेस्ट इज grappling with the Islamic invasion. Periana, a very warm welcome on the show. Let's get started. Ji.
Namaskar Gayatri ji, and namaste to all your audience.
So Periana, I would like to begin from a very bombarding topic. The geopolitics across the world is changing, and we are looking at a changing world order. How do you see it? What do the stars say? क्या कहता है? Astrology क्या कहते हैं? Planets क्या कहते हैं? जी.
My thinking is it is too early to read based on what we see around us, the realignments that we see. It is too early to judge because this is a very unstable period. In my last year annual predictions video, I basically said that 2020, 2021 was a very abnormal and unstable period. 2022 and 23 were somewhat back to normal times, and 2024 is a transition time, and 25, 26 are again a very unstable and abnormal time. And then 27, 28, 29 is when all the alliances, who's with who, who's against who, all that will really become clear. So in my assessment, whatever apparent changes that we see around us right now, we should take with a pinch of salt, because some of the big players, whether it's US or China or Russia or India or European Union, they all have competing interests. And nobody is really clear about exactly what the new world order is going to be, but everybody has their own idea of what the new world order should be. One thing we can be confident is that around 2030 time frame, there'll be a big clash between superpowers, which will result in a new world order for sure, basically in 2030s. So, but the thing is, there'll be a lot of moves made by different players, different big players in 25 and 26, and none of these need to be really final. From 27 onwards, 28, 28, 29 onwards, we'll really start seeing the real alignment. One thing is for sure. Actually, a few things are for sure. One is, as far as India is concerned, India under the leadership of Narendra Modi ji, and also if there is a transition in this term, as I expect, basically under the leadership of the next leader, which I expect to be Yogi ji, but it is yet to be seen. Irrespective of the leader, India will continue to rise in this decade, and in 2030s, India will have a pole place in the world. And throughout this decade, India will keep rising and set itself up for that position. That is one thing. And the other thing is, India will not hastily align with one side versus the other. India will play the game very smartly, basically, move all the pieces appropriately so that India can jump on any side in late 2020s as needed. So India will be very smart about having good relations. For example, India has good relations with the US on one side and China on the other side, and Russia, of course. And with Russia on one side, Ukraine on the other side. With Iran on one side, Israel on the other side. With Israel on one side and various other Arab countries on the other side. Like that, India is doing a great job, and India will continue to do this. India will not reveal its cards, basically. India will position itself so that it can be on any side when the sides are basically very clear in the late 2020s. That is one thing as far as India is concerned. And as far as US is concerned, as far as US is concerned, one thing is for sure: US is walking towards a major confrontation with China by the end of this war. This is unavoidable. Uh, Irrespective of who the leader is, whether now Donald Trump won, but whether it was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, bottom line is US was destined to lock hands with China and basically set up for a major confrontation over Taiwan and over basically dominating the world economy, over controlling the world economy. A big war with China towards the late end of this decade was inevitable. And especially with Donald Trump winning, it is even more likely now with all the tariff wars, etc. The the pressure on Chinese economy is already struggling a bit, and the pressure will increase with all these economic wars that are going on, and that will basically make this confrontation inevitable. And I will not be surprised if US and China are actually preparing. They realize that towards the end of this decade, a big war between those countries is basically inevitable, and they're already preparing for that. And now, the other thing is, I'm very confident that as a result of this confrontation between US and China, two things are going to happen. China is going to just collapse. China, though it seems like China will overtake US at this time, towards the end of this decade, and more importantly, in the next decade, China will just collapse. It will split into multiple countries, and it will not be the next superpower. It will basically weaken. And US, in the process of taking China down, US will also weaken. It will not go down like China, but it will be more like what happened to UK in 1950s, 1940s. Basically, from a position of unquestioned superpower, UK became a second level, still a power, but a second level power, and whereas US became the next superpower. So, US, unfortunately, through this decade and the next decade, US is going to transition into that kind of a situation. So some of the moves that US will take in this decade, with an eye towards defeating China in a major war, will end up weakening US also. That is one thing. Now, whatever China does, whatever US does in 2025-26 timeframe will be eye towards that confrontation. So right now, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea form an alliance. If you look at, for example, the Ukraine war, Russia is being helped by China. Chinese financial support is there, and North Korea is actually sending mercenaries. Their army is fighting there in Ukraine. Also, Iran is supplying various technologies, missiles, and all these things. So the thing is, this alliance needs to be broken in time for 2030. So some of the moves that US is making right now, in my assessment, are basically in that direction. They want to try to weaken that alliance. So they want to attract Russia. And in my assessment, this is just a short-term thing. This is just for the next couple of years. But finally, when US and China are really locking hands with respect to Taiwan, with respect to the silicon industry, all the silicon manufacturing, for example, is in Taiwan. And the whole world runs based on semiconductors. Without semiconductors, without these electronic chips, nothing will work. Computers, phones, even fridges, microwaves, cars, nothing will basically function. So semiconductors are very important for the world, and Taiwan manufactures a majority of the semiconductors. So manufacturing technology is in Taiwan. So that both US and China will want to control that. So that once that war becomes that clash becomes really clear to the world, at that time, I do think that Russia will align with China. Russia will not be on US side. So in the end, the China, Russia, North Korea, Iran alliance will basically stay together. But the thing is, US will do its best to split that alliance over the next few years. So in my and second thing, as far as Ukraine is concerned, the common narrative in the mainstream media as well as on social media is that Trump is in the pocket of Putin. he's basically doing whatever Putin wants him to do, and he's basically selling Ukraine to Putin and all that. I am afraid that is not correct. If you look at the charts of Putin and Trump, there is some synergy. Putin's moon is exalted, Trump's moon is debilitated, but they are in samsaptakas. So basically, they can work together. So there can be some admiration that Trump may have towards Putin. But the thing is, in the end, I think the foreign policy is directed towards U.S. interests. So one interest is weakening the China's alliance. So that we already talked about. The second thing is Ukraine has a lot of rare earth elements which are extremely important for the latest technologies. Whether you're taking iPhones or various new semiconductors, or you're taking solar panels, or you're taking space exploration, space technology. For all these, you basically need rare earth elements, and Ukraine has some of the best reserves in the world. So US basically wants to get in there and get some kind of peace, at least partial peace, and basically try to get a very advantageous deal with Ukraine and exploit that. So this is not really about peace. People talk about peace. We like peace. We are not for war, etc. But the thing is, honestly, this is not a decade of peace. This is actually a decade of war. There may be some breaks now and then. There may be some ceasefires, but in general, this is a decade of a ramp up in a war towards a major war at the end of this decade. That's unfortunately the reality. But looking at Ukraine narrowly, when their moon is in Capricorn, I forgot the exact degree, but basically in the last 1/3 of Capricorn. So when Saturn was very close to their natal moon meaning the moon at the time of their independence, basically when they declared Ukraine as a country after Soviet Union's collapse, basically based on that time is very well known, just like India's independence chart, Ukraine chart is very well known. So based on that chart, when Saturn was exactly over moon, basically the peak Sadesati, that is when the war started. And recently, on March 20, Saturn moved away to Pisces. So that is the third house. So basically the Sadesati has ended for Ukraine. So there is some chance of the window has opened for peace. But the thing is, my assessment is it will not be quick, even though people assume that next week suddenly it will all going to end. It will probably take several months. I will not be surprised if it goes till next year also. Next spring, next February, March timeframe is actually more conducive than this year. But this year is also possible, but it will definitely take a few months. After August 2025 is a better window for peace in Ukraine. But the thing is, I don't expect peace in Ukraine to be long term. Even if there is peace during this window of opportunity in Ukraine in the next 15 months, it will not last long. It will not last more than a year or two, because from 2027 onwards, the annual charts of Ukraine look really bad, and they show a lot of conflict. So the thing is, my assessment is this: US doesn't really care about peace in Ukraine or anything. It is just that there are certain strategic interests that US has there. So they want basically to get hold of those interests. And also by appearing to align with Russia, they can weaken China's hold on Russia. So they're playing that game right now. But what will probably happen is, in the coming months or year or so, there may be some peace deal and things may go well. But the thing is, later on, there'll be a collision between the interests of US, interests of China, interests of European Union, and interests of Russia. Because if you look at Ukraine, just like any other area, every player has their own interest. US wants something, China wants something, Russia wants something. Everybody has different interests. So there will be some clash because of those interests, and basically conflict will, unfortunately, in my opinion, return. Same with Israel. There was a peace deal and there was a ceasefire for a while, but the thing is, it's not really holding up. And this is what I said in the past. There may be temporary truce, temporary ceasefires now and then in Israel, but the thing is, it is not a time of peace. It is unfortunately a time of war. But wars that will end up resulting in sustainable peace later, basically several years down the road. So that is basically the unfortunate reality. So going back to the main point, the fact that US seems to be aligned with Russia right now should be taken with a pinch of salt. I think this is just some games being played by the US administration. And of course, Putin is a really smart person. He's a KGB mastermind. So he knows his interest. So everybody is playing this game of chess. So basically, in other words, don't assume that because one chess player has given up his queen, don't assume that he's losing the game or he's resigning. It may be a gambit. It's basically just a temporary thing, and many more steps are yet to come. So that is my overall assessment when it comes to the Russia-US friendship.
Prerna, I would like to ask one thing. We have been talking about breakup of Pakistan, but I'm more interested in breakup of China actually, because a broken China, disintegrated into maybe two, three countries, four countries, is really an advantage for us because it will reduce down its strength and economy and the threat that it always poses. Ji.
Yes, I do. I'm see in astrology. Astrology is not a deterministic science; it's a probabilistic science. Everything has some probability. Some things are more likely. We have more confidence in certain predictions. We have less confidence in certain predictions. But it's all about confidence. Basically, it's not 100% ever, almost. So, but the thing is, the fact that China will break up before 2036, between 2020 and 2036, is something that I have a very high level of confidence in. The one window of opportunity for that, when it is possible, is in late 2020s. But what is more likely is more than late 2020s, like 2028, 2029 timeframe. What is more likely is in the 2030s. After the major confrontation that I mentioned between US and China, in 2030s, between 2031 and 2036, if not earlier, definitely in that period, I expect that China will break up into multiple parts. See, the thing is, China has a lot of structural instability. If you look at the country, if you look at uh, it's basically a communist country. People basically, the one, basically practically you can call him a dictator. One dictator controls the whole nation and everybody basically just blindly follows. Don't human beings have a desire for freedom? Human beings want freedom. So this is not a natural human condition. But the thing is, all the dissent that is buried under the surface is basically not coming up because people are happy in general. Not all, but enough people are happy with what is going on economically in the country. If you look at USSR also, see, it was such a powerful country, but look at how fast it collapsed. So the same thing can happen when the economy is under duress. And I expect that some of the policies of Trump and in general, world is headed towards economic troubles in the second half of this decade. So as basically world economy slows down, the economy in China will slow down too, perhaps even worse. And the thing is, when economy is not doing well for them, then basically all the suppressed dissent that is under the surface will just surface to the top, and basically there will be rebellion that will be tough to control. And also at the same time, the Chinese leadership will be dealing with conflict with the US and how to they'll be doing the game plans for those and doing preparations. So they may be caught unawares with what is happening within the country. So late 2020s, there is a chance, there is a window of opportunity. But the best window is, if I were to pick, I will basically pick early 2030s, basically. Early to mid 2030s is the time when that is very likely to happen. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, that will happen even earlier. Pakistan is, as I mentioned a few times, I think on your channel also, this decade is terrible for Pakistan. The next few years are really terrible for Pakistan. So even before 2030, in the next few years itself, actually, Pakistan could break up into multiple countries and may lose Kashmir also. Of course, it's not just about Kashmir; they may lose several other parts, basically. So Pakistan is a gone case, but for China, it will probably take more time. It's not immediate because right now the country is very strong and doing well, and the control of the CCP over the country is very strong. But don't assume that this is permanent. things do change and they will change.
Yes. Now, a very important thing, Periana, I think we started our first video with that topic only. The West is infested with invasion and immigration by the Islamists. How do you see these two Abrahamic religions dealing with each other during this decade?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. See, there is no clear way to predict these things, but the thing is, what I do is I use the mundane charts like the lunar New Year chart, solar New Year chart, Saturn Jupiter conjunction chart, and various other mundane charts that we use for the capitals of the country to see how the future will be, how the next year or next several years will be for a country. Similarly, I do it from Mecca, which is basically the center of Islam. I do it from Mecca to see how things are for that particular religion in the world. And when I do that, and also another thing we can do is we can look at individual countries like UK, France, Germany, etc., and look at their annual charts and look at the Navamsa and Vimshamsa chart to show religion, spirituality, etc. in those countries and see the strife there. So based on those factors, my assessment is the religious tensions will increase in these countries, in the European countries, in the liberal European countries over the remaining part of this decade. Things will continue to be bad. And even people who want to be secular, who want to basically be balanced, who don't want to be seen as biased or bigoted, etc., they will start. In the past, all such people just blindly supported Islam. There was a false equivalency between all religions, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, etc. People wanted to be even-handed and look at all religions the same way. But the thing is, I do expect that some, for the lack of a better word, intolerance of Islam will increase in the West, not only in the US but also in the Europe in the coming years. And based on some long-term charts made at Mecca, I do think that the next decade and a half is a really critical time for Islam. See, one thing is everything that's created has its own destiny. It basically has ebbs and flows. It has ups and downs. So I will not be surprised if in the next decade and a half, Islam basically becomes considerably weakened or may even disappear. But the thing is, practically speaking, a religion that is practiced by a big percentage of the world, it is basically unlikely to completely disappear. So, looking at the astrological factors and common sense, my thinking is probably we see a group called ex-Muslims, people who used to be followers of Islam but basically became disenchanted for various reasons, and they basically advocate against Islam. So the number of such ex-Muslims will increase. Even now, actually, according to some estimates, even in some Islamic countries, ex-Muslims are actually considerable numbers. They form a good percentage of the country, but they keep quiet. Only some of them are vocal. Many of them keep quiet because they are scared. So, but the thing is, when the number of such people reaches a critical mass, ex-Muslims may start speaking up more. So, the control of Islam over Islamic countries may weaken. The other thing is also the basic tenets of Islam. They may go through reform. If you look at various other religions, they have gone through some kind of reform in the past. See, Christians also went on crusades and basically by force converted people. But the thing is now they use money to do that. They don't use force to convert people, and they still some Christians still believe that Christianity is a superior religion, and basically, if you are not a Christian, you're going to go to hell, etc. All these things, but there are a considerable percentage of Christians who don't think like that. They do think that, yeah, this is my way to God, but the thing is, there could be other ways. So, some kind of secular thinking or common sense thinking that is more tolerant of other religions. But at the same time, you want to promote your religion, do promote your religion, but use accepted methods like basically using money, arguing with people, talking to people rather than using force. So that kind of reform may also come in Islam, basically. So some of the people who are funding terrorism, etc., they may work towards making Islam more tolerant. By tolerant, don't misunderstand me. Basically, what I mean is, don't say that yeah, Rama is God, Krishna is God. But the thing is, this is the only way. Muhammad is the last prophet. Otherwise, you will go to hell. But the thing is, don't kill people over it. Don't basically. So that kind of thing, that kind of approach, and then you can use money to convert people. You can talk to people. So basically, whatever happened to Christianity over the last couple of centuries may happen to Islam also, and it may. But the thing is, when that happens, see, Christianity, it is still strong in many countries, but the thing is, in countries where Christianity is the main religion, it's not wiping out other religions. It is allowing other religions to coexist, and I expect that Islam will also come to that kind of status quo, that kind of equilibrium over the next decade and a half. Either that, or basically be completely wiped out. But the former is based on common sense more likely. But the thing is, based on my reading of various charts, Islam is in trouble over the next decade and a half. It will be a time of either, basically, it is a time when eighth house is activated. It can show either death or it can show transformation. You transform into something else that will basically allow you to sustain yourself longer. But the thing is, this is in the long term. In the short term, in the next few years, till 2030 or so, the unfortunate poison of Islamic terrorism that was promoted by some people. For example, if you look at the Saudi Arabian government, they are talking more tolerant, more secular in a more secular way now. If you look at MBS, but the thing is, these are the people who funded Islamic terrorism in the early days, basically. So they sowed the seeds, but they are basically now doing a trying to do a reversal. But you can't. You can only get the genie out of the bottle. You can't put it back. So the thing is, the genie is out there. So some of the people who are influenced by the jihadist menace, they are out there and they believe that they are doing the right thing. They will go to heaven and all that. So world will have to deal with that, and world will deal with that. But the thing is, they will become weaker, and Islam will basically face some kind of reckoning and face the eighth house results, either death or transformation over the next decade and a half.
What about Hinduism, Periana? Will it spread or will it shrink more? Because we have been shrinking since centuries. Ji.
Yeah. Since centuries we shrunk, but the thing is, one thing you have to remember, to put things in perspective, wherever these Abrahamic religions went, whichever country they went, they just wiped out the native religions. Whatever native cultures were there, whatever religion was practiced there traditionally, it was just wiped out completely. In India, if you look at India, the Akhanda Bharat that practiced Hinduism has shrunk basically. Some of the parts on the edges have fallen. But the thing is, even there, Hinduism is not dead. It is a minority, but it is still being practiced. And if you come to the crux, the core of Akhand Bharat, in the core, Hinduism is still majority religion. Even though they tried to wipe out, and they succeeded to wipe out in every other part of the world. Here, we still have Hinduism being practiced. So take some hope from that. My assessment is, and I said earlier, from around, I forget the exact year, but around 950 AD or so, a period of 1200 years is basically a period of from around 900 AD till 2100 AD. This is a period, this 1200-year chart shows terrible suffering for Hinduism, for India in general. But the thing is, we are on the verge of the next 1200-year chart, which is awesome, which basically shows great things happening with India as center and with Hinduism as the center. So my assessment is, we are towards the end of the period when the efforts to wipe out Hinduism would basically be supported by nature. We are at the end of that period. So the thing and the awakening, reawakening, and renaissance in Hinduism has already started. So the thing is, I see this the next 50, 60, next 80 years or so as a period of ramp up towards the next golden phase, basically. So I'm not really worried that Hinduism will shrink or Hinduism will disappear. But the thing is, because the forces that are attacking from the edges of the core of India, some parts, just like Kashmir suffered in the last few decades, some parts, some border areas may suffer in the coming decade. But the thing is, overall, my assessment is that Hinduism will strengthen itself. Hinduism will become a way basically that people think in terms of. They don't basically say that I'm a Hindu. If you just say that I'm a Hindu just as a check mark in some kind of survey, it doesn't really make you a Hindu. Hindus will start practicing Hinduism more in the coming decade or two. The practice of practical Hinduism will rise, and also being in oppression for a millennium under Muslim rule and later under European rule, Hindus were too concerned to say that they were Hindus because they suppress their culture, their customs, and they practice their religion somewhat secretively. In other words, they weren't open about what they did and they weren't proud about it. They kind of did it in embarrassment, in silence, in privacy. But the thing is, all that is changing and it will continue to change. So Hindus will be more assertive. Hindu customs will be practiced more, and Hindu religion, instead of just saying I'm a Hindu, I don't like so and so other religions, people will actually follow Hinduism. And one more thing I see happening in the next decade and a half is, see, there is one problem with Hinduism also. Hindus tell people, oh, you are not supposed to do this, you are not supposed to do that. There are a lot of rules that are said, and many of them without a rationale, without any meaning. And many of these are corruptions. Basically, we have deviated from the way of rishis, where they were very compassionate. They gave hundreds of different paths, made them just available and accessible to people. And in the last millennium, particularly the last couple of centuries, and particularly in the last few decades, Hinduism has been made to be inaccessible to people. So practical Hinduism, not just saying I'm a Hindu, but practical Hinduism will become more accessible to people over the next decade and a half, and people will take more pride in doing that. And obviously, when that happens, the minorities that were used to oppressing Hindus were basically keeping quiet, and they were basically talking more confidently about their religions for the last millennium, and particularly in the last 80 years of independence. So they will first feel threatened, but the thing is, over the long term, a new equilibrium will be established. The the minorities will be able to practice their religion safely, but at the same time, they cannot basically bully Hindus, and Hindus will again practice their religion very confidently. So I'm not really worried about Hinduism, but at the same time, as I said earlier, the genie of terrorism, religious terrorism that has been unleashed on the world by Middle East, Pakistan nexus, or also funded by US, unfortunately, for the last few decades, is still there. Those forces are still there. So India will have to deal with those forces in a firm way. And I want to add one word here. There are a lot of fundamentalist Muslims who basically want to resort to violence to convert people, and who basically believe that if you are not following the teachings of a particular prophet, following a particular book, you will go to hell, you are an infidel and all that. But the thing is, it is a fact. Even though some of the right-wing groups may not agree with this, especially on the social media, it is a fact that a majority of Indian Muslims, they have the genes, Sanatan Dharma genes in them. Their ancestors were practitioners of Sanatana Dharma. So the tolerance and an intuitive understanding of an intuitive common sense understanding that God cannot be cruel, God cannot be basically illogical. If you only this way is the right way to God and there are no other ways is not logical. So that awareness is subconsciously there in a majority of Indian Christians as well as Indian Muslims. But the thing is, if we basically combine all people of one religion as one group, one entity, and talk about them with one language and use the same adjectives for all of them, what we are doing is we are forcing the tolerant ones to gang up with the intolerant ones. What India has to do is to basically speak to the tolerant Muslims, tolerant Christians, who are willing to basically redefine their religion in a way that is consistent with Hindu thinking, with the Sanatana Dharmic thinking. So speak to them and make them allies rather than make them your adversaries, and show them that the intolerant ones within their religion are bringing bad name to their religion, and basically you have to divide them. Unfortunately, because if you say things that are basically negative, you get more views, you get more following. So basically what happens on social media, on YouTube channels, is people basically promote intolerance among Hindus. But the thing is, I'm not saying tolerate intolerance, but the thing is, recognize that there are tolerant ones in other religions, non-Hindu religions, especially in India, which has great heritage in tolerance over a long period of time. So basically, you have to divide those people. In my opinion, Narendra Modi ji and various BJP leaders, the BJP leadership is doing a great job. But the thing is, some of the people on the right wing are unhappy with that. They want them to be more harsh. You have to be more harsh like Yogi ji. But the thing is, to the miscreants, to the people who are following Islam in a peaceful way, who are not really trying to cause any problems, you basically don't have to be harsh to them. You have to actually try to get them on your side. So this is one thing that India has to do well in the next decade, because you're not going to basically convert a big percentage of the country from their religion to Hinduism. You are not going to do that. But what you can do is you can transform the way they practice their own religion. You can basically define the terms of how they view the religion and the relationship with God. So that is something that I expect India will do successfully in the next decade and a half.
Ji, thank you so much, Periana. We are looking forward to a lot of change times in next 10 years. And last में जाते जाते, how is going to be India's future?
I already said the next decade is really good for India.
For
But the
India,
thing is,
yeah.
the coming year and a half, there will be a lot of ups and downs. There'll be some ups and downs. See, for example, world economy is going to struggle. I gave this analogy earlier. Whatever we are seeing between 2020 and 2030 is compressed version of what the world saw in 1900s. In 1920, there was a Spanish flu pandemic, and 10 years later, 1930, there was a Great Depression. Economy basically struggled because of the pandemic and because of some changes that happened. And actually, interestingly, there were some tariffs in late 1920s then also. So some tariffs and economic Great Depression, and then that resulted in big wars because countries were struggling. There was a clash between countries, and late 1930s you saw war, and 1940 you basically had a full-fledged World War II. So whatever happened in the 25-year period is compressed now. It is happening within 10 years or so, 10, 11 years. So 2020 was the pandemic, and 2025, 26 is the period when economy will really take a nosedive. And then 2030 is the time when there will be a war. So unfortunately, there will be some economic struggles in the world. India will be relatively okay compared to much of the world, but obviously, when the world is struggling, India will struggle. So there will be some economic struggles, and also, I think I mentioned in my previous video on your channel, there is a chance of war that India may have to get involved in the next year and a half or so. This has the potential for a war for India, either on the east or on the west. Either side, or maybe both. So more likely on the Pakistan side, Kashmir, Pakistan side. So there is a chance of, but nothing disastrous, nothing major, nothing very long term. But there will be some short term wars that India may have to get involved in. So because of all these things, because of all these instabilities, there will be ups and downs. There will be some aggressive agenda followed legislatively by Indian government after this March. So I told you earlier that after March, it's a good time for Modi ji and Indian government. So India will do some aggressive things, but the thing is, the enemies of India will try to use it to divide Indians along religious lines, caste lines, and class lines, etc. So there will be those efforts will keep going on, and because of the instability in the whole world, sometimes when people are doing well, these things fall on deaf ears. But when people are struggling, all these things basically will ratchet up tension. So there will be ups and downs. But fortunately, Rahul Gandhiji's best time ran till last June, and from last June to this June is a average time, not as good as the previous year, average time. And from this June onwards, it's really terrible time for him. So fortunately, the fact that Modi ji and Indian government will face some challenges and some ups and downs in the next year and a half does not really mean that they will fall and Congress will come to power. Nothing like that. But the thing is, things will be topsy turvy over the next few years. But the thing is, India has the right leadership, and fortunately, because of the last year election results, India will continue to have good leadership over the next several years, and India will manage these chaotic times as well as possible. But people will feel some pinch. People in regular lives, especially middle class people, will feel some pinch. But the thing is, this is the best that it can be, unfortunately. But the thing is, all these changes, all the chaos that we see in the world, will result in India being placed in a very positive place in the world in 2030s. So long term, thumbs up for India. Medium term, basically things will be up and down. Keep your faith. Keep your faith in the leadership.
Thank you so much, Periana, for joining. जाने से पहले सभी viewers से request है, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the alternate media. Anna also has a very nice YouTube channel where, on off and on basis, depending on the need, he gives astrological advices, and he has a website also जहाँ पे he gives how to do homes and homas. So I'll pin both the website and the YouTube channel in the comment section. Please go and visit that also. और अगर आप लोग को हमारा काम पसंद आता है, एनालिसिस आप पसंद आती है, तो प्लीज़ हमें सपोर्ट करें. यूपीआई और नंबर दोनों स्क्रीन के ऊपर है. और अगर आप मुझसे कुछ शेयर करना चाहते हैं, यू वांट टू सेंड सम इन्फॉर्मेशन, सम वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डॉक्यूमेंट्स और एनीथिंग, ऑल द लिंक्स आर गिवन इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स. इसी के साथ जय हिंद, जय श्री राम, हर हर महादेव.
जय श्री राम, हर हर महादेव.